So, hi everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. The following seminar is brought to you by iExplore. I am pleased to be introducing our seminar presenter today, Andy, who will be telling us all about the Ebola fever. So, Andy, take it away.
Thank you, Kathy, for her introduction. So spoiler alert, today we are talking about Ebola hemorrhagic fever. All right. Last time, if any of you came to my previous seminar on the Spanish flu, you would have heard me reference this disease a lot in my Spanish flu seminar. Well, you hear me saying Ebola hemorrhagic fever this, Ebola hemorrhagic fever that. So today we're going to talk about this elephant in the room, Ebola hemorrhagic fever. Okay? Stay with me as we explore one of the most horrifying diseases that humanity have ever witnessed. So first of all, we have to identify the date of the outbreak. So on the fateful day of December 26, 2013, the Ebola outbreak officially started. I mean, you guys have to keep in mind this, okay? So Ebola isn't like COVID-19. It is not a brand new disease that just miraculously appeared out of nowhere in December 26, 2013. It pre-existed, right? But its pre-existence doesn't mean it's well known, okay? It existed, but it wasn't well known. So there was many small, like localized Ebola outbreaks throughout the 19th century in different parts of Africa, but all those were very small, very regional, right? So they're all contained in a very specific region, right? Which made those outbreaks kind of insignificant until December 26, 2013. What is different about this outbreak is that Ebola it moved from being the nightmare for a few people in Africa to being the nightmare of the entire world, right? This outbreak stretched across multiple countries in Africa, and there was, cases reported in the U.S. There was cases reported in Europe. Okay, the world panicked at this deadly outbreak. So here is the countries affected by the 2013 Ebola outbreak. Let's go down the list. Number 1, Liberia. Number 2, Sierra Leone. Number 2, Guinea. Number 3, Nigeria. And then we have Mali, the United States, Senegal, Spain, United Kingdom, Italy, and the DRC. For those of you that don't know, DRC is known as the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and it is the only country that still has cases of Ebola today. Okay? And keep in mind that all of these countries reported active cases of Ebola, right? So all of these countries reported active cases of this disease. So this is gonna give you guys some kind of idea on how wide-reaching this pandemic was, okay? So previous pandemics, for example, let's take one of these countries on the list, for example. Let's say a previous outbreak started in Mali, which previous outbreaks have started in Mali. Usually there will just be one village with around 20 people or less contracting Ebola, right? But then in this outbreak, all of these countries has over 5 cases of Ebola, and most of those cases were being fatal, okay? So why was Ebola so alarming? So Ebola affected more than 20,000 people, right? But I mean, if you compare this outbreak to other outbreaks, for example, the Spanish flu outbreak, of 1918, which affected more than 200 million people, right? And even to today's coronavirus, right? It doesn't seem that 20,000 people is a enormous number, right? You consider other outbreaks, Ebola seems like a small outbreak. But why would a small outbreak manage to make it into my PPT? Well, the reason is very simple. Ebola was feared for its incredibly high death rate. The death rate is around 80% and above. So remember, the Spanish flu, okay, is another huge historical pandemic in the past. Okay, it killed 200 million people. It killed more people than World War II, World War I combined. It killed so much people, right? Guess what's the death rate? It's around 60% low. the Ebola virus had an 80% death rate, right? Just how big is an 80% death rate? Let's say 10 people has Ebola virus. 8 of them would die. Even with the best medical treatment available for them, 8 people would die. Say in context, if 10 people has coronavirus, only around 2 or 1 of them would die. Okay? And this was the reason why the entire world was so alarmed by Ebola virus, because number one, it wasn't like, for example, rabies. If you guys don't know what rabies is a viral infection spread by dogs, right? That infects your neurological system and shuts it down. And its death rate is almost 100%. But unlike rabies, Ebola virus is way more virulent, like it's way more pathogenic. It can spread way easier, right? You just touch the infected person's bodily fluids and you got a death sentence. So Ebola is both pretty good at spreading, pretty decent at spreading, and has an incredibly high death rate. This kind of disease is what scientists are really afraid of, right? A lot of experts speculate that one day, one of the main causes that humans would go extinct on Earth, if humans ever do, would be because of a disease that has a high death rate and is very good at spreading at the same time, right? And Ebola kind of matched the categories. It didn't 100% match categories. That's why we're all still alive today. But it kind of matched the categories. That's why the entire world was so alarmed at this actually relatively small outbreak compared to other diseases. Okay? So, first of all, after we talk so much about why Ebola was so alarming, it comes down to this question. Why would this disease be called Ebola? Why don't call it the Ripper hemorrhagic fever or something cool like that? Why call it Ebola? Well, let me tell you, you might be guessing that Ebola stands for something, right? It may be an acronym. It is not. Ebola is a river. Okay, if you go onto the map and you search Ebola River, you're gonna get a river. And Ebola virus is named Ebola virus because it was speculated that this virus originated from near the Ebola River region. Okay, and what's actually quite funny is there was a book written by a Belgian scientist, epidemiologist, that actively attended the global health effort in Africa for Ebola, and he actually says that the Ebola River wasn't the closest river to the origins of this virus. Keep in mind, it was not the closest river. But it was the disease was still named Ebola virus because the river that was actually closest to the origin place of the virus was already there was already a disease named after that river. So they just dubbed it Ebola, which is the river the second closest to the hotspot, to the place that it came from. And as you can see, this isn't a very good naming system, right? So nowadays, which is basically after 2015, the World Health Organization and basically all the scientists in the world voted that diseases that are newly discovered are not going to be allowed to be named after locations or people's names anymore. And the reason for this is to avoid prejudice and racism, right? So later on, I'm going to talk to you guys a lot about how Ebola kind of created a bit of stigma around Africa for quite a while, right? And so all these factors combined, scientists decided we're not going to name things like diseases after places anymore. So Ebola was kind of the last big disease that got its name from a location, right? So you see, right now we have COVID-19. It's called COVID-19. It isn't named after the origin place. It's named after, the species of the virus, the year it is discovered in, right? And kind of the disease it caused. So it's called, COVID-19, coronavirus disease discovered in 2019, right? The diseases, they can be named after the time of discovery, the type of virus it is, any symptoms it causes, but it cannot be named after locations or the names of people anymore. And this is to avoid conflict and stigma and racism. So the mechanism of Ebola. By the mechanism of Ebola, I mean how Ebola kills people. And so how Ebola kills people? it goes like this. So Ebola kills people by messing with the clotting of the blood. So Ebola either makes your blood clot. So basically, let's explain what a blood clot is real quick. So if you take a knife and cut yourself, right? They're gonna be cut on your skin. After about a few hours or so, you're gonna notice that this brownish scab that forms over your wound. That is a blood clot. A blood clot is usually created by your blood when it detects an injury that is causing you to bleed. And the good thing about a blood clot usually is when it's covering a wound, it will prevent the wound from being affected by bacteria, okay? And it can also help the skin heal faster and also prevent you from bleeding to death. But with the case of Ebola, it can make your blood just clot randomly. So you don't even have a cut, okay? The blood just starts clotting in the bloodstream. So your blood's flowing around the body, Ebola comes along and just makes them form a clot. And as you know, a clot is a solid mass, and a solid mass in the middle of a bloodstream is gonna block it, right? Ebola can also make you unable to clot, okay? Which means this leads to hemorrhaging. Hemorrhaging is a word that's also part of the Ebola's name, Ebola hemorrhagic fever, right? So what hemorrhaging is basically uncontrollable internal bleeding. So internal is inside your body, and bleeding is, bleeding, and hemorrhaging is uncontrolled internal bleeding, which means that Ebola is causing you to bleed inside your body uncontrollably, right? So with parts of your blood vessels completely clotted up by Ebola virus caused blood clots, others completely destroyed and started to hemorrhage from, Ebola caused hemorrhaging, what's gonna happen? Well, if everybody has learned their sciences, you realize that not Ebola virus, your body's organs depend on oxygen and nutrients delivered by the blood to thrive and to keep functioning. But when the blood is busy being hemorrhaged and clotted by Ebola virus, these organs are being blood deprived, right? So very soon there will be mass degenerative and destruction of organ tissue from the patient from lack of blood supply. And very quickly, this can be fatal, okay? And also realize that out of the 20% of people that do survive Ebola virus, I got bad news for you. These people usually suffer from long-term disabilities after they survive Ebola, from chronic pain to certain regions of for certain limbs being dead. Dead means that the area only has dead tissue, it doesn't really operate anymore. Blindness, all kinds of other internal organ issues, right? So nobody really recovers from Ebola and is just healthy. You either die from Ebola virus or you recover from it and be left with disabilities and basically would rather be dead. So that is just the scary truth about the Ebola virus, okay? It is one of the worst diseases that humanity has ever experienced because it can kill you or it can just disable you, which is both pretty bad. It won't leave you alone. If you catch it, you won't be left alone, okay? And this is mainly due to the fact that if you catch Ebola, no matter what happens, a lot of your organ tissue is going to die from blood clot. Even though if you manage, your immune system somehow managed to kick this virus out of your body, enough of your organ tissue is gonna have already died for you to be left with a disability. So what was the global response to Ebola like? So Ebola received a level 5 danger from the World Health Organization. So to give you some context on level 5 rating, well, think about this. HIV virus, or human immunodeficiency virus, the virus that caused the infamous AIDS, right? The virus that completely destroys the human's immune system. That virus, okay, that's so famous that everybody should know, only has around a 2 or 3 rating from World Health Organization. And Ebola has a 5, okay? So the world was panicking, right? So since the discovery of antibiotics, humans have been mostly free from, fearing their lives to disease. Humans, so the human alarm to disease is slowly dropping down, okay? So humans are slowly letting down their guard, okay? And what this is is that Ebola just suddenly came out of nowhere, and people wasn't really prepared to deal with it, right? So people realized that, hey, this disease is way more deadly than we'll ever seen before. Remember, 80 to 90% death rate. Spanish flu was 60%, right? And Spanish flu caused a huge panic. So, of course, Ebola also caused a huge panic. What kind of panic did Ebola cause? Well, Ebola caused basically every single country around the globe. I mean, every country that, has the resources to do this, all those countries banded together and send help to Africa. Okay? So all these countries banded together, they got a group of doctors, they got those brave, selfless doctors to go into this Ebola-affected region and help these countries deal with Ebola virus, right? And here's also a little question I want you guys to ask. So it's like this: why would people send help to Africa when countries weren't really sending help to each other during coronavirus? They weren't sending help to each other during the Black Death, and they weren't sending help to each other during the Spanish flu and smallpox and all that. But why did they send help to Africa during Ebola virus? Because number one, people actually took Ebola virus seriously, right? Death is the strongest message that can wake somebody up from ignorance. Also, Africa, we don't mean this in any bad way, but Africa, the continent, is a lot less economically and technologically developed compared to other continents, which means a disease such as Ebola appearing in Africa, okay, the authorities are, slightly ineffective at containing the disease, right? And other countries, for example, the US, can't just sit there because they are alarmed, right? They don't want their own citizens to die. So what do? They would help, okay? And this goal was reflected by basically every single country that helped. And that every single country is basically most of the developed nations in Europe, China, the US, and Canada, right? And of course, Russia. So countries really put an effort into this. Support teams around the world came to help Africa deal with the outbreak. This was one of the first times that all countries, okay, globally, banded together for a specific cause. And this specific cause was Ebola virus. And here, I've been hiding this for a long time. Ebola's real name. Okay, we're going to start using this in the rest of the seminar. Ebola, like the virus name, Zaire Ebola virus, okay? The disease caused by Ebola virus, Ebola hemorrhagic fever, and the virus is Zaire Ebola virus. So, just putting that out there. So, countries are trying to help Africa solve the Ebola issue, all right? So how did Ebola manage to spread? Reason number one, okay? Africa was a poor region. Okay, so let's return to this. Africa, especially the area that Ebola was spreading. If you guys can see where I'm pointing to, this area, which is red, and the key to this map, the legend to this map says widespread outbreak. This region, so is actually relatively poor. So it has Guinea and Sierra Leone. These two countries are relatively poor compared to a lot of other countries in Africa and the rest of the world, of course. Right? Would Sierra Leone have a lot of reported cases of child labor and, it's just a very poor country. Liberia is slightly okay, but we'll get to why Liberia, a country that, compared to the rest of Africa, slightly more advanced, still didn't manage to get an outbreak, okay? And then, look, all these countries over here, like Niger, Burkina Faso, Togo, Benin, Ghana, Mauritania, Cameroon, they all didn't have Ebola, but Mali and Nigeria did. And these two are, again, one of the poorest countries in Africa. If you get on a map, you notice that the country of Mali is almost entirely situated in the Sahara Desert, right? Which is a pretty hostile climate for both a country to develop and healthcare, okay? Nigeria had a lot of civil unrest in the past years. Recently there was like this kind of food review company that shot a documentary in Nigeria, and they said Nigeria is one of the hardest countries to shoot a film in just because they're pretty civil unrest, right? A lot of gangs and everything, and the country isn't very economically well off at all as well. So it spreads to all these, countries with bad economics and bad, not very up to standard resources, right? For example, Mali had one physician per 1,000 people. So that means 1,000 people depends on one single doctor to take care of them. That's the ratio. One doctor to 1,000 people. Okay. So usually, just in a consideration, right? The amount of kids in a whole grade in the school is usually around 300, right? And there's usually multiple doctors to take care of those 300 people, right? Everybody has a different family doctor, usually. Mali has one doctor per about 3 times more the amount of people in an average school grade, but they only have one doctor for all those people. All these factors means that any effort that the government, the local government, or the global response teams tried to launch against Ebola was very hard because they didn't have the resources to actually get the plans lifted off the ground and going, right? So, for example, I want quarantine. Hello, do we have enough doctors and researchers to set up quarantine? What did you say, doctors and researchers? Yes, we're requesting, experienced doctors and researchers that are brave enough to, combat this Ebola virus and help us set a quarantine. Sorry, we completely ran out of them. Are you serious? You only sent us 20. Yeah, we did. That was all of us. That was all of them. I mean, that conversation that I just showed you guys was a slightly exaggeration, but you get the idea, right? It was very bad, resources in the region, and this led to ineffective response, which is why Ebola matches spread globally. One of the reasons, at least. So, second reason is actually more complex, and it's basically down to one word: unrest, right? Religious beliefs and education levels may vary incredibly steeply in Africa. Many uneducated and deeply religious individuals start rumors. Rumors, okay? If you don't know, especially in a lot of African countries, communities are kind of separate. There's like one village, and one other village, and a city. It's kind of like that. And especially in those villages, a rumor is incredibly dangerous. Because, especially in those villages, it's actually quite hard to have law enforcement, right? And then you have a rumor and people are widespread panicking. They're not going to listen to your restrictions. They're going to start running everywhere. They're going to try to run away and inevitably bring Ebola to other countries by running away, right? And, also this picture shows, right, for a lot of local people, their religious beliefs and, actions from their local government before has made them very, very skeptical and doubtful about their local government. And what this means is they don't trust the government. So they might be like, why would the government want us to stay put in their homes? Why? Okay? They never done anything good for us before. Why are they doing this? They must be trying to get more money, right? And they won't listen. So they don't care. They're just gonna keep going, keep trying to go to other countries, keep trying to go everywhere, right? And also, there's one more thing in Africa that's actually that's usually it's kind of only in Africa. I don't know how to explain this. And it's that in Africa, a lot of times when a family member gets sick, he goes to the hospital, right? If it's just like, for example, he gets the flu and they get a checkup, fine, they can return. Nothing really happens. But if something's serious, for Ebola example, right? For example, Ebola, the whole family tags along. So like if this guy has a big family, for example, this guy has an 8 people family, and this guy is sick, his whole family goes with him to the hospital. And as you know, Africa has very limited amount of hospitals, a very limited amount of space in hospitals. And I guess everybody can picture what would happen if every Ebola patient going there has basically their whole large family going with them. They're going to create a very crowded environment that also happen to have a lot of Ebola patients and medical waste. And a lot of African countries have hospitals have bad hygiene standards because they just don't have the resources and technology to get good hygiene standards. And this just leads to widespread Ebola mainly between family members, right? So a lot of times, you get sick, your family members. I'm pretty sure a lot of you kids currently listening to this have gotten like a slightly worse case of the flu before, when a bacterial infection. You know how worried your parents are, right? They won't leave your side. They try to fuss over you, take care of you, right? And they don't even care if they are getting infected. They don't wear a mask when coming to a room or something like that. Of course, most people think that's normal, but in the case of Ebola, that is extremely bad, because patients with Ebola, hemorrhaging is going to cause them to constantly vomit out blood. Yes, I know it sounds very gruesome. Hemorrhaging is gonna cause them to constantly vomit blood. And later on, I'll explain this further. But Ebola spreads by contact with bodily fluids of the affected person. So closely trying to take care of an Ebola patient without protective gear, which is what a lot of family members of Ebola patients try to do, is just gonna get yourself Ebola virus. Okay. So it's just basically civil unrest, bad education levels, and bad social practices that kind of contributed to Ebola spreading across borders and affecting like 20,000 people. People say that Ebola had a chance of only affecting barely a few thousand people, but all of the factors that we're going to introduce you to guys right now made it infect 20,000 people. So how did Ebola manage to spread? Reason number 3. At the start of the outbreak, local officials did not identify the disease as Ebola until months later. This allowed Ebola to spread to a number of other African countries, and this is also contributed to a lack of resources in Africa. So, the 2013 Ebola outbreak, it originally came from the country of Liberia, right? So Liberia, compared to some other countries, for example, Mali, right? They have more money. Liberia has more money. They have a slightly more advanced medical system, right? But because of the fact that Ebola wasn't usually in Liberia, they were usually in other countries before, and also that Ebola wasn't very well documented in Africa because, of course, back then Africa was pretty primitive compared to the rest of the world, of course. I mean, so they had pretty bad documentations. So doctors at the time, so initially the outbreak starts. You got a bunch of patients going to a hospital with weird symptoms, right? So you're a doctor in Africa, your patient comes in, he is vomiting dark blobs of blood everywhere, he's having aches all over his body, he's having extremely high fever, he has weird, very, very interesting looking bruises everywhere around his body. He's having trouble staying conscious and unconfused. He's having trouble talking, right? All these scary symptoms. The patient arrives at the hospital. Doctors have no idea. They don't know what happened. They don't know what caused this, right? Until a few months later, when the virus has already spread to nearby countries like Guinea, like Nigeria, Mali, they realize that this is the deadly Ebola virus. Okay? So a lot of you guys might underestimate this, but identifying the pathogen is basically the number one step to stop a disease outbreak. And the reason for it is that for different pathogens, you treat it and try to stop the outbreak with different methods, right? Let's give you some examples. For example, if you have a massive outbreak of the Black Death, what you try to do is quarantine and wipe out as much rodents as possible. But on the other hand, if you have disease such as cholera that's outbreaking, what you do is try to find a contaminated water source that would be spreading cholera, right? And isolate it and purify it and stop people from drinking from, right? So the fact that Ebola, it wasn't identified as Ebola for a few months was very important. People initially thought that it was a close cousin of Ebola. They thought it was the Marburg virus. So because the Marburg virus didn't cause any big outbreaks, we won't have a listen on that, but I'm going to talk about it briefly right now. So Marburg was a virus that was initially discovered by some German scientists, and is also a hemorrhagic fever with a death rate of 60% to 70%. So it's still a pretty deadly disease. But from, its ability to spread and its death rate, it isn't as terrifying as Ebola. Marburg also doesn't disable its recoverers. So officials thought that it was Marburg that was spreading, right, and didn't identify that the virus was Ebola until a few months later. And I tell you, this is it's the African countries didn't have the resources to correctly identify the Ebola virus. So the fourth reason why Ebola managed to spread was that the initial global response failed. Okay, so the global response failed. So why? Why did the initial global response fail so badly? And the reason for that is a lack of, well, number one, lack of cooperation between the different countries. As there's this book that I suggest to you guys later, kind of sort of exposes kind of a sort of competition between scientists for who this achievement belongs to, right? And this factor minimized the collaboration between help teams from different countries. Also, Ebola was quite new. It wasn't, of course, it pre-existed, but people weren't focused on it. That means they had no idea. They didn't know anything about the virus, okay, at that time. So even though by the time the global response started, the local authorities have already identified the virus as the Ebola virus, there was still one more thing. Scientists at the time and doctors, they didn't even know how Ebola virus actually spreads to people. There was still widespread belief that Ebola virus was still only spread between bats and people. A lot of scientists didn't even realize at the time of the first response that Ebola had achieved human-to-human transmission, right? And those that did realize that Ebola had this power completely underestimated the Ebola's ability to do this. And they also didn't know, how Ebola was managing to spread between people from people. So I'm just going to put this clear. So human-to-human spread can be very different from, with diseases. For example, malaria spreads between human by humans to mosquitoes. Tuberculosis and the flu spreads between humans by air, right? Certain bacteria like Staphylococcus aureus, which is a bacteria that sometimes causes pneumonia and sometimes causes wound infections, spreads to people by contaminated surfaces, right? Cholera, which is the disease that causes severe diarrhea and can kill patients within a few days, spreads to people through contaminated water sources, right? Same as typhoid fever, it can spread through contaminated water sources, okay? And HIV virus spreads between close contacts from bodily fluids of the affected person. How did Ebola spread, right? Was it by air? If it was by air, we gotta be scared, right? If it was by air, we wouldn't be alive right now, right? It wasn't by air. Was it by water? Was it by bodily fluids? Was it by parasite? What was it by? Right? Scientists had no idea. A few months later, after Ebola, it was the outbreak was announced as Ebola. After closely monitoring, Ebola patients and people that came in contact with them, and doing some research and asking around locals, scientists finally realized that Ebola spread by contact with bodily fluids of the affected person. So, in case some of you guys don't really get the idea of what exactly is a bodily fluid is the following: tears, nose excretions, saliva, sweat, blood, reproductive fluids, right? Digestive juices, okay? It's mainly these ones that are spreading the Ebola virus. And let's give you, for example, sweating. Sweat of affected person can spread Ebola virus. If somebody touches the sweat from an Ebola patient, they are more likely to contract the disease themselves. And Africa isn't exactly known for its cool and chilly climate, isn't it? It isn't. It is known for its scorching hot sun and lack of electricity, which equals to no air conditioning, equals to sweaty Ebola patients, which equals to caretakers might accidentally touch the sweat and get Ebola virus. All right? And also, keep in mind that saliva and nose excretions just fly out from your face when you sneeze, right? A sneeze can send particles of nose excretions and saliva upwards of 2 feet, all right? And even though Ebola won't really stay airborne, if enough of those particles actually land, for example, someone's eyes, they will still get Ebola virus, okay? So scientists, they needed to establish how Ebola was spreading to be able to effectively quarantine the people that were having Ebola virus to successfully hold the outbreak. And as you can see later, and also with the duration of this outbreak and the number of people that affected, after the Ebola virus got figured out, the little tricks got figured out, they were shut down pretty quickly. So the fifth reason of why Ebola managed to spread, and I believe this was this is the second last reason. So it is harsh and permanent conditions made it very hard to document cases of Ebola, right? So as already explained, a lot of times Africa, the country, is separated by vast wastelands, and then you have one village here and one village here, and then wasteland in between. Okay, and then scientists have to go to these remote villages and go, "Hello, did you have any reported cases of Ebola?" And some of those local people won't be corroborated, right? For those that do, they might not know it was Ebola, right? So it will be really hard for scientists to actually figure out the scale of the outbreak. And also the fact that, this was actually pretty documented pretty well by a book that I'm about to suggest to you guys, but the just amount of work and effort and risk that scientists have to take to actually reach certain Ebola hotspots is just insane, right? They have to drive through abandoned wasteland or take very small planes to reach an airport, then drive, then just through muddy rainforest and take a plane again, then drive. So this disheartened a lot of scientists into just going, I'll pass. I'll just do other projects, right? For the remainder of the scientists that stuck around to research Ebola virus, let's currently give them a round of applause. They risked their lives to help combat this deadly enemy of humanity. Okay. So a lot of times, especially documented by a book written by a Belgian scientist, right? A lot of times they go in a village, they're not really wearing protective gear. They sometimes don't wear this because, it's very hot. And a lot of the time, scientists can be kind of lazy sometimes. A lot of people think of scientists as one of those most careful people in the world, and they will never get lazy. But actually, scientists sometimes do, and they slack off. So a lot of times, those medical researchers, they go into the area, right? They're interviewing all the people that was affected. They're going to remote villages where they don't even speak the same language, and they have to bring translators. They're not really wearing protective gear. Yeah, it's Ebola hotspot. And to go there, document cases of Ebola spread, see if there are any new ways that Ebola was spreading but they didn't know about, right? See if the local people knew any possible treatments to Ebola virus, right? And just to generally get the data down. This was incredibly hard for scientists. And I would really love it if all of you guys just appreciated the fact and the length that scientists would go to keep us safe, right? To keep our world running and to keep it, and keep all of us safe and alive and not hemorrhaging from Ebola hemorrhagic fever. So, why Ebola was halted? So, number one, after the response teams from around the world realized their big mistake, right? They realized their mistake that they needed for number one, be more cooperative with each other. Number two, they figured out how Ebola was spreading, right? And also at this time, a lot more scientists came. So the first wave of scientists, it was just, a first wave of scientists. And basically everything, the first wave, is relatively small. And especially in Ebola's case, the second wave was a lot larger. So they got a lot more backup. They got attention. They got more attention from the WHO. Banks and companies from around the world raised millions of dollars for funds to find a vaccine, treatment, cure, or anything for Ebola virus. Okay? And this basically made, it kind of worked. Right? So those scientists, the very ones that I told you guys about, that were trying to remote villages and Ebola hotspots, document cases, they figured out if virus spreads, the Ebola was contained, right? Anybody that had Ebola was strictly quarantined. They were not allowed to see anyone, okay? And the medical helpers would be there with full hazmat, with full hazard suit, okay? Like suits so tight that basically no earthly pathogen could possibly penetrate, and go in and be super careful, right? And just administer the life support to the patients that had Ebola virus. And at the same time, companies around the world are combining millions of dollars together. Basically every single pharmaceutical company was jumping in and trying to research for a cure for Ebola virus. Ebola was halted. The reason that Ebola was halted actually lies in the Ebola disease itself. So for those of you that came to my Spanish flu seminar, I'm pretty sure some of you did, you would realize that in the Spanish flu episode, I also said that part of the reason why the Spanish flu stopped lies in the Spanish flu itself, right? And I said that for the Spanish flu was the reason its death rate was too high and caused a big panic and, that kind of stuff. But for Ebola virus, it wasn't mainly the death rate. The death rate did play an enormous part in the virus's inability to spread in the end because, look, you have Ebola virus. It is a hemorrhagic fever. And Ebola virus is a disease that actually progresses pretty fast. The only reason that it could spread to the 20,000 people was that it possessed the ability to spread during the incubation period. For those of you who don't know, I'm going to explain. An incubation period is the time that a person gets infected with a particular pathogen to the time that they actually show symptoms that they have infected and they have disease, right? So for Ebola, it was around 2 weeks to 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, right? So let's say Bob contracted Ebola virus on, let's say January 1st, right? Let's say Bob contracted Ebola virus. There's a chance that he's barely developed symptoms 21 days later, like, July 21st, or something like that. So this was the reason why Ebola was spreading. But then scientists figured out how to test for Ebola during its incubation period, which means Ebola lost this ability to spread. And when you actually show symptoms to Ebola, you're not even going to be in the shape of getting off your bed or anything. It's just you're having terminal hemorrhage. You're losing blood very fast, okay? And organs are shutting down. Excuse me. So Ebola wasn't that going to spread. Also, I said that you have to come in contact with bodily fluids of an Ebola patient. That means, for example, let's say I have Ebola. I go achoo into this room, right? 20 minutes later, somebody walks in the same spot, they will not get Ebola virus. But let's say I have the flu. I go achoo, right? 20 minutes later, somebody walks across the exact same air that I sneeze into and inhales, they can get the flu. So basically, this means that Ebola virus, okay, wasn't very good at spreading just genetically and naturally, which was a enormous blessing to humanity, saved us from being wiped out. Scientists speculate that if a disease with the death rate of Ebola and the spread, like the virulency of COVID-19 appears in the world, it could signal the end of civilization because of the widespread panic and the number of deaths it's going to cause is going to quickly lead to a state of anarchy in many different countries and cause total system collapse. But luckily for humans, Ebola virus wasn't very good at spreading, right? You had to literally take it by hand, right? Go to the bodily fluids of somebody with Ebola virus and touch it. And then at that point, you only have a chance of getting Ebola virus. If you touch it, then you put it into your eyes, nose, or mouth, three magical organs that lets every disease into you. Then you would have it, right? So this is the second reason. Notice that the second reason why Ebola was halted was that Ebola itself wasn't very good at spreading, right? If it actually was good at spreading, let's find a disease that was good at spreading. COVID-19, right? COVID-19 received extreme measures. If a patient gets administered into an intensive care unit for COVID-19 in China, for example, any item that is brought into his room is not going to be allowed to leave his room until after the outbreak. And if it has to leave the object has to be brought back out of the room, it had to soak in disinfectant for 2 whole days. Right? Look at COVID-19, still ravaging the world. But Ebola could not do this because its virulency is actually relatively bad compared to a lot of other viruses. It was kind of similar to how HIV spreads, but it just had a slightly more variety of ways that it could spread. So aftermath and result. The most notable result is a irrational fear of Ebola. So this kind of was known as Ebola phobia. And if you guys don't know, a phobia or irrational fear is basically a fear without good reason towards a specific cause. And this kind of Ebola phobia and irrational fear to Ebola create a stigma against Africans, right? There's this talk show created by this African person called Trevor, right? It demonstrated this fact very well, right? On stage, he during that Ebola outbreak, he flew from South Africa, which is the country that didn't have Ebola virus, to the U.S., right? His plane was going from South Africa to Washington, then to, I believe, San Francisco, and then, or something like that, right? So he got on the plane, he flew to Washington, and then he was on a transfer, right? And listen, so a transfer plane is usually like it's a plane. It has a lot of passengers that is going from that's just boarding from Washington. They weren't transfers, right? Which means that this plane, the plane that Mr. Trevor was about to board for his transfer, is a domestic flight inside the United States. And this means that this plane wasn't prepared for Ebola virus, for having necessary measures for Ebola virus. And that means that the cabin crew had to kind of improvise, and they kind of did. So when this Mr. Trevor was walking onto the plane, he heard this announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, Africans are about to board the plane. Please consider covering your eyes, nose, and mouths because we're about to spray disinfectant due to the Ebola crisis. Right? So, I mean, this is actually kind of, back then, especially in the face of Ebola, people can be pretty blockheaded. And, Mr. Trevor made a pretty good joke out of this on stage. He said, at least have the decency of saying it when we're not on the plane. Right? But anyway, this is actually a pretty serious issue. And this was part of the reason why, after the Ebola outbreak, scientists around the world stopped naming diseases after places, right? So I'm just going to bring this up this example, right, for, the coronavirus. The coronavirus has detrimented our world, it's paused the entire world's economics, right? And if coronavirus was named after a country, we will have 5 seconds of silence country, right? The country will be kind of doomed. So I guess that we are all moving forward. We are all moving forward to a ideal world where there's no racism, there's no stigma, and there's no hate. Right? We're all getting there. And on the way, we have to take small steps, such as, for example, not naming diseases after places. Right? Back didn't realize this. People didn't realize this could cause stigma. But Ebola really demonstrated how much stigma that widespread panic could just cause, right? And now we have the happy ending of Ebola or any other diseases not going to be named after any people or locations, right? And if any of you think that there's not a lot of diseases named after locations or people, let me here's some examples of diseases that are named after places. Middle East acute respiratory syndrome. Okay, right? You have that, and you have, I believe, people for diseases named after people. You have Parkinson's disease. It's named after a guy called Parkinson, right? And Ebola virus was named after Ebola River. So right now, just keep in mind, anybody that says from now on, if humans discover a new disease and somebody calls the disease by the place it discovered in, you can sit back, relax, and have a little laugh at their intelligence and think to yourself how this person might have lived under their whole entire life and never got to see the light of day. And listen to amazing seminars such as the one that I'm hosting to learn some facts about our current world. Speculations and aftermath. Scientists believe that as time goes on, the number of diseases that have similar origins to Ebola will increase. So, for those of you that didn't know, Ebola virus came from African fruit bats and some other families of bats. Well, it seems like bats are very bad to us, don't you think? Bats gave us coronavirus. Bats gave us Ebola virus. Bats gave us Marburg, I believe. And bats gave us a slew of other disease. All right? Now let's bring up an interesting thing. A lot of people are saying, hey, bats are so annoying. Why don't we kill the bats? Well, for next time you hear anybody ranting that, we gotta kill the bats, we gotta kill the mosquitoes, you can calm them down and tell them this. Okay? All animals and all insects in the world plays an important part in how the Earth ecosystem operates, right? Bats help regulate the population of insects and plants, right? They help, for example, fruit bats. They help spread the seeds of plants for them to spread. And for example, just insect-eating, bats. They help keep the number of disease-causing insects, or just insects in general, in the correct range, right? A lot of people know mosquitoes are annoying, right? They spread African sleeping sickness. Wait, see, there's a bad for location. They spread malaria, they spread dengue fever, they spread, the Zika virus, they spread all that. The insect-eating bats target mosquitoes, right? And you say, why don't we just eradicate mosquitoes? Well, mosquitoes act as a food source for many birds and bats. And also keep in mind that out of the billions, millions, not millions, thousands of species of mosquitoes, only a handful actually are blood-sucking. And out of those, only the female mosquitoes are bloodsuckers. And the female mosquitoes only suck her blood when they are pregnant with eggs to feed their young ones. So the male mosquitoes actually are pollinators. Okay? So when mosquitoes are gone, a huge portion of the Earth plants are going to be gone with them. And of course, we are not going to risk causing an imbalance to the entire Earth, right? So it's kind of in this situation. You can either choose to save a certain amount of people's lives, right? Or you can choose to have a chance of ending the world. It's a lose-lose situation with, bats and mosquitoes, kind of. and the disease is spread. So, and also, scientists believe that disease with the origin of Ebola, which is humans come in contact with wildlife and then getting the wildlife's disease. This kind of disease is going to become more common due to the fact that the growing population in Africa is going to force humans and Africans to grow within closer contact with each other, right? So let's say Africa used to have a certain amount of people, and they all live in small villages. But then that means you have this huge savanna wasteland for wildlife to grow, right? But Africa, the population in Africa is blooming, right? So which means that people need a space to live, so that the more population there is, the more people are going to push into the territory of wild animals. And this is going to lead to more and more unwanted or wanted encounters between humans and wild animals, right? And this can result in wild animals giving something horrible to humans, such as Ebola virus. And it could also work the other way around. Humans can give diseases to wild animals, right? A lot of you guys didn't hear about this. This isn't very what people care about, but this is very important. Human disease can affect animals. For example, scientists have realized that a human infection such as tuberculosis can affect elephants, and in elephants is very deadly. Other infections that are human that are actually sort of harmful, for example, the cold or the flu, can affect monkeys and other primates, and for them, the death rate is a lot higher. Okay, so we actually really need to keep in mind that try to stay away from wild animal. And I'm gonna spread this message here. Even if you just have a common little sniffle, don't go into close contact with animals. You just have a chance of spreading it to them, right? On the short term, you might make the animal feel very bad and it might die. But on the long term, you might create something like the Spanish flu, right? Or the Ebola virus. The Ebola virus and Spanish flu are both kind of merged versions of different viruses. I'm going to explain it again here. Viruses can merge when different viruses affect the exact same host cell. Okay, it's kind of called antigenic shift. And by providing, for example, an animal with some human viruses, you might just end up accidentally creating the next pandemic, the next horrible disease that humans have to face. So, conservation efforts, right? Move forward for a more disease-free, more green, and more livable Earth for every single species on the planet, not just humans, right? You gotta take care of the animals. And Ebola, I personally see Ebola as animals telling humans that enough is enough. You need to kind of chill and leave us alone, or you're gonna get punished. Right? We need to take that warning seriously. Right? It's a more lesson from Ebola. Leave nature alone. Okay. Humans are not gonna win a battle against nature. Nature can kick humans, can easily defeat humans anytime by just sending a disease our way, right? So we have to live on this planet conservatively, right? We can't waste resources, explore resources, and destroy natural habitats of animals. So here is the book suggestion. It is called The Hot Zone. It is written by Richard Preston. It isn't the exact book that I talked about. This is basically what this book is about. It's written by an American person, right? And what this book is that it takes the Ebola virus, it kind of adapts the story a little bit so that all the stories and all the information in the book is 100% true, with the exception of a few names, right? So they have some names of characters that are not true, but everything else is true. So if you are now suddenly really interested in Ebola virus and believe that you would like to learn more about the most deadly disease in human history, then please feel free to check out this book. You can probably find this book in your local library, bookstore, or on a ebook, for example, Kobo or Kindos. Okay? So if any of you are interested, have a happy read and be free to, share your thoughts with other people and spread the message of Ebola, right? Remember, the message of Ebola is to not exploit Mother Nature and to keep in mind that we need to take care of the environment, right? So that is the end of today's Ebola seminar. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it, right? With the following weeks, we're beginning to be coming out with some more seminars. Stay tuned for that. We're gonna have more very exciting and intriguing disease seminars for all of you guys, and let's together defeat the most annoying enemy that humans have ever faced: disease. Right? Let's defeat this enemy together. With that, see you guys next week. And Kathy, take it away.
Thank you so much.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys. Thank you.